Hey guys, just really quick. I wanted to first of all say thank you to all of you guys for the 1,000 subscribers. You guys are amazing. This is actually one of two videos I'm doing for like the 1,000 subscriber thank you video thing. This one is actually just kind of a parody of all of the dozens and dozens of video game creepypastas I've heard. The second video is actually like a real special surprise I have for you guys, which I'll be releasing here very soon as well. That being said, I've had a couple people ask me if I'm going to do a Q&A anytime soon. So because I've hit 1,000 subscribers, I've decided that I will do that if you guys would like me to. So go ahead and feel free to leave me questions in the comments, email them to me, send them to me on Twitter or Facebook or anything like that. And if I do get enough questions altogether in total that I think warrants a video, then I will do a Q&A video. With that, I hope you guys enjoy the story. Ever since I can remember, which is a pretty long time, I've loved video games. I remember getting a Nintendo 64 for Christmas when I was just a very young boy. From that day on, there was no other way I wanted to spend my time aside from playing video games. Unfortunately, I only had 2 games for my Nintendo 64 when I got it. With my dad being a deadbeat alcoholic most of the time, I had to spend time making friends at school so I could go to their houses and steal games from them. After a couple years of this, I had a pretty nice collection. Eventually, other gaming systems began to come out. I remember trying to raise money as a little kid in order to buy them. I would go into grocery stores and empty out cans of soda and beer so I could sell the cans to a recycling plant. Or, during the summer, I would find yard sales to go to so I could pose as a family's son and collect money for items people bought. Ever since I've been an adult, I have earned a respectable living as a professional mascot costume tester, and therefore have been able to buy my own gaming systems and games. So I made sure to buy the very best gaming systems of all time, such as the Virtual Boy, Sega CD, Sega Saturn, the Nokia N-Gage, the Tiger Telematics Gizmondo 2005, and my all-time personal favorite, the Tiger Gamecom. Yes, I certainly had a good taste and bought all the classics. The only system that I was missing from my current collection was the original NES. I used to have one, but a couple years ago I got drunk and fell on top of it. It turned out to be fine, but was stolen the next day in an unrelated incident. So recently, I've been looking around trying to find another NES to buy. Unfortunately, I had been having a hard time locating one for sale. I checked on Craigslist and found a few different ads for men looking for a younger guy to get together with to have some fun. I thought for sure that they were referring to playing Mario and stuff. I even double-checked by texting them and asking them if they liked exploring pipes and were looking for a good time. But when I actually went over to their trailer, they had something completely different in mind. Like, completely different. I ended up over at that trailer 3 different times too, but still no luck. All 3 of the guys that invited me over had the same phone number. They even looked the exact same. They must have been brothers or something, although they were only there one at a time for some reason. So I decided that I might give Craigslist a break for a while. I almost completely gave up on looking for an NES. But one day I came across an unusual looking store on my way home. For some reason, I'd never noticed it before until today. The sign for the store was dark and dingy. It read, "The Haunted Video Game Store." I thought the name was quite unusual, but also pretty awesome. A haunted store that also happened to sell completely normal video games. That must be what it is. I immediately pulled into the parking lot. I got out of my car and began walking up to the store. It looked kind of dark inside the store and I didn't see an open sign. I pulled on the door and to my surprise, it opened. The aroma hit me as soon as I walked in. It smelled like a combination of incense and an old person's house. I began looking around the store. I didn't see anyone at the small counter up front. The store looked quite unorganized. Tables all over the place with stacks of games, movies, and all sorts of other miscellaneous items. I started walking through the store, trying to see if I could find what I was looking for. "Hello?" I said. I began wondering if anyone was even here. I continued talking. I really wish I could get some help. Just then I heard, "How about you help yourself?" The voice was coming from the back of the store. I turned to look and saw a very old-looking woman walk up towards the front. She had gray, frizzy, messy hair. She was slowly striding towards the front counter. Her eyes were the darkest I've ever seen. I looked at them as she stared straight ahead, not even glancing over at me. So I guess the customer service here wasn't the best. That's okay though. I looked around for a couple more minutes, but then began to get impatient. I walked up to the woman and asked her if they had an NES for sale. She stopped what she was doing and just sat there silently for several moments. Finally, she stood up and said, "Come with me." We started walking through the store, but to my surprise, she led me to the back of the store. We walked over to the side of the back of the room and stopped when we got to a large safe. I watched in confusion as she began turning the dial to put in the combination. Why on earth would they leave all sorts of merchandise sitting around on tables up front without anyone even looking over it, but keep an NES locked up in the back? The old woman finished with the lock and opened the door to the safe. In it sat a single, dust-covered box. She pulled it out of the safe and blew the dust off. On top of the box it read, "Warning, do not open." I just kind of shrugged my shoulders and asked if I could see the gaming system. She stood there with an apprehensive look on her face, but ended up handing me the box. I became extremely excited and started feeling like a kid on Christmas morning once I went to open the box. I pulled it apart and took a look. Inside sat an old-looking NES system with a single controller and cords. Aside from that, it looked completely normal. I met the woman back up front and asked her where they kept the NES games for sale, as I was hoping to finally play the original Mario game again. She replied, "Sorry, we don't sell any games for that. We only sell games for the really good gaming system that everyone loves, the Sega Dreamcast." I was disappointed, but happy to at least find the NES. I asked her how much I owed her and began to get out my wallet. That's when she told me that there would be no charge for the system. The only stipulation was that if I decided to get rid of the NES, I couldn't return it to this store. I was a little confused, but couldn't complain. The only thing better than finding an NES was getting it for free. I thanked her and walked out of the store. I decided I would go home and make sure the NES worked, and then call around and see if I could find the original Mario game anywhere. Upon arriving home, I quickly unpackaged the box and began setting everything up as quickly as possible. I opened the door on the gaming system to see the condition of the inside, and there was a game in it. At first I couldn't tell what game it was. I removed it and there wasn't any actual label on it. Instead, handwritten in marker, it read, "Mario's Nightmare." I'd never heard of this game, but I was intrigued to say the least. I put the game back in and started up the NES, but all I got was a black screen. At first, I got disappointed and figured either the game or the system didn't work, but then I realized I forgot to blow on the game. I pulled it back out, gave it a quick blowjob, and tried it again. This time, it appeared to be working. The NES loaded up like normal and went to the start screen of the original Mario game. I got excited once I realized that this ended up being the game I had wanted to play all along. I selected one-player game and got started. I began running through the level when I quickly noticed something a bit weird. Upon jumping on a Goomba to flatten them, instead of making the noise I had remembered, it sounded more like Nancy Kerrigan when she got attacked by Tonya Harding's goons. I found this to be odd, but just decided I'd probably remembered the game wrong. It had been a while since I've played it. I continued on, but then I misjudged a jump and fell into a pit. But instead of starting the level over, it went to some type of cut screen. This I definitely didn't remember. It showed Mario lying on the ground in the dungeon scene. He woke up and began looking at the screen. He looked terrified. I didn't understand what was going on. I realized I had control over Mario again and started making him run through the level. I ran for a while and then noticed Mario kept looking over his shoulder behind him and then back at the screen, like something was chasing him. Suddenly the level seemed to just kind of end. Mario came to a wall and there was nowhere left for him to go. He began to look around in a panic. Suddenly, from the left of the screen, Luigi walked in. Mario cowered down. Luigi continued to walk towards Mario. That's when I noticed he had something in his hand. It was hard to tell for sure, but it looked like he had a knife. Once he reached Mario, he proceeded to stab him and then walked away. Mario fell down immediately. It looked like he was bleeding. It was original NES graphics, so it was hard to tell. I got closer to my TV to get a better look. Around Mario's torso, I saw some red pixels that appeared to be some type of blood. There were even a few lighter colored square pixels that looked like they might be Mario's intestines. I immediately began puking relentlessly. I turned off the Nintendo, but continued vomiting uncontrollably. Once all of my stomach contents were emptied out, I spent the next several hours dry heaving. Finally, I was able to stop and fell asleep. I woke up the next day and headed into work. About halfway through my day, I began thinking about that strange game I had played the night before. Suddenly, the image of the red and pink pixels popped in my head again, and I began to vomit uncontrollably all over my workplace. I went home early that day. Later in the evening, I just couldn't stop thinking about the game, and although it had made me so sick, I was just so curious about it. I decided I would give it another try, and hope that this time it wouldn't make me so sick. This time I was able to play through a couple stages of the game, and then when I finished the third stage, it went to another cut screen. But it wasn't like the last one. This looked like it was a real video. It had a human-looking Luigi standing there. Just then, I noticed what was next to him in the room. It was a woman. She was lying on a table, with her hands and feet bound. I looked closer, and it was my mother. I mean, my mom abandoned me right after I was born, and I've never seen her and therefore I have no idea what she looks like, but I was certain it was her. Luigi began walking over to her with something sharp in his hand. He looked at the screen and smiled. At that very moment, I decided I was turning the Nintendo off. I pushed the power button, but it wouldn't shut off, so I decided to unplug it from the wall. But somehow, the Nintendo was still receiving power because it didn't shut off. I ran downstairs and found the breaker box and shut off power to the entire house, but when I got back to my room, the Nintendo and TV were still on. In a fit of panic, I quickly got in my car and crashed into the utility pole near my house, which seemed to knock out power on my entire street. But still, once I made my way back into my house and up into my room, the damn Nintendo and TV were still on. Finally, I had no option left and began smashing the TV and the Nintendo. That finally seemed to do the trick. I was upset for quite some time after that, but eventually I was able to calm down. But just as I felt like it was finally over, I heard something knock into my window. Then I heard it again. And before I knew it, there was a barrage of noise hitting my house. I looked out the window and my house was being hit with a wave of spaghetti and meatballs and mustaches. At this very moment, I knew that Luigi was after me. I just had a feeling. It was like I could sense it. Plus, I also saw him standing in my backyard throwing all that stuff at my house. I hid in my closet. About a minute later, the noise stopped. Just when I thought it was safe to come out, I heard another noise. Except this time, the noise was from my back door opening. The fear in me continued to grow. I sat still, trying to be as quiet as possible. I heard footsteps as he walked up my stairs and down the hallway. My doorknob was turned and I could hear him come into my room. He walked around in there a bit, and then it sounded like he left. I waited a couple more minutes until coming out of the closet. As soon as I stepped out, I noticed he was still right there, standing in the doorway, facing the hallway. He turned around and looked at me. With a knife in his hand, he began walking towards me. I fell down to my knees and begged him not to kill me as he inched closer and closer. Right as I could feel him standing in front of me, I looked up at him. Just then, he began to laugh. I looked at him with confusion. Then he peeled off his mustache and the rest of his disguise. "Mr. Peterson?" I said. Mr. Peterson was the father of one of the boys I used to go to school with when I was younger. "What are you doing? Why are you doing this to me?" I asked. He replied by saying, "Listen, you've been causing me problems for years. First, you would come over to play with Zach when you guys were kids and would steal his video games. Then, you would come into my store and pour out my beverages and steal the cans. And once I had lost so much money that I had to sell all my belongings and host a garage sale, you even showed up there and started selling my stuff and keeping the money for it. So, after all these years, once I found out you were looking for an NES, I decided to get some payback. I went ahead and put up a new sign over one of my businesses so I could lure you in. I had to modify a Nintendo in a game and also put a battery in it that would keep it and any TV it was hooked up to turned on, but it was well worth it." Relieved, I began laughing too. "Mr. Peterson, you totally got me," I said. We continued having a good laugh together, and then he said, "But seriously, I also pressed charges for all the theft and the police are on their way." That part wasn't so funny. But after only 30 days, I'm now out of jail. I lost my awesome job, but things could be worse. I'm sure I'll find something soon. In the meantime, I have a way to keep myself busy. It looks like I have a new game to play. I'm not sure who sent it, but it showed up in the mail today. It was just a normal looking CD that came in a case with the title of the game written on it in black marker. I mean, what could go wrong? Anyway, I have to go. I'm very excited to start my new game, Sonic.exe.